Still pretty rough. Now, it's great if you're a shipper looking to save costs, but it's not so great if you're the one looking for things to move. Now, talking about the challenges, of course, a big challenge is for operators in this space is what is the playbook? How does it change? And should you have had a playbook to begin with? Because if you're figuring it out now, that's not very good. Now that the freight market, though, is more sour than a potato salad left out at a 4th of July cookout, what does it take for logistics and trucking companies to thrive in this adversity? Well, folks, it's your lucky day because we're going to find out in this episode of Loaded and Rolling. Welcome to Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wasson. A little bit delayed on the hand swipe. We'll work on that in the next episode. It's hard work to run a trucking company, and it's just as hard to work in logistics that attempts to mesh the demands of shippers with the needs of carriers. Now, during a tight market where freight flows endlessly, carriers and brokers' strategies mimic that of a person in one of those money boxes where you attempt to catch as much flying cash in the air as possible, but before the time runs out. But to continue my metaphor, this money machine is now gone, and carriers used to the boom times are now dealing with a freight bust that has seen volumes plummet back down to earth. Now, for those operators left in this space, it does require a new approach as margins are tight, competition is fierce, and customers who are used to being the second fiddle to rates are now finally in control of their own destiny. What a great feeling. But dear listeners, do not fret. Today we're going to dive deeper into how to adapt to changing markets. Joining me to talk about overcoming the freight market blues is Manny McElroy, Senior Vice President of Transportation at ITS Logistics. For those of you who don't know, ITS Logistics was founded in 1999, has decades of experience in asset-light transportation, drayage, intermodal, expedited, dedicated, and other transportation solutions. Welcome.
Hey, Thomas, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you on as well. I know right now we are definitely singing the freight blues, and I don't know if it's Memphis style or if we're kicking into some more Blue Note potentially. Diving in, tell us first a little bit about yourself, what ITS does, and some of your experience.
Yeah, well, I've been at ITS. It's my 11th year. I'm the Senior Vice President of Transportation. ITS really is a one-stop shop. When you look at it from the entire logistics industry, we do quite a bit of our transportation is drayage, port drayage, inland drayage, and also over-the-road domestic transportation. We have dedicated fleet. We also have about 4.5 million square feet of warehousing in 3 different locations across the country. So really heavily focused on service and communication.
And I always think it's awesome because when you talk to like a pure play company, if it's only trucking or only logistics or only warehousing, you really don't get the kind of full spectrum experience to find out like end to end what you're dealing with. And talking about, how do we overcome this market? One of the big things is relationships. Now, from my experience preface, relationships is normally who's yelling at who at the moment and who has the ability to yell at the other person. Dive into right now, given that we're in the summer doldrums, what do relationships look like at this stage?
So many people talk about it's a shipper's market right now, and customers are in control. So, for us here at ITS, what we did last year and the year before when it was a carrier's market is really playing out in how you're being treated from your shippers right now, and that really comes from building that trust when technically the carriers were in control, right? When rates were at an all-time high, and you can easily go into the spot market and capture high revenue, high margin dollars. So from us, what you put in over those years when it was a carrier market, where you up late at night, where you're answering those phone calls, where you stick into your dedicated contracts, has really allotted the opportunity to be able to continue to take market share, in a down market. So it's consistently building that trust and being available for your customers.
There's some really cool research. The folks at MIT had talked about it, and it talked about who remembers in terms of relationships. And they called the carriers goldfish and the shippers elephants, because the study showed that the shippers would typically remember over the course of years, while the carriers like, oh crap, I barely got 6 months ahead. I'm looking at the ground. In that experience, How many folks did you see try to just take advantage and throw relationships away? Or was this something where being in the space, how hard was it to maintain that discipline? We know that money's just flowing out of the crevices at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone that's been in the industry for over a decade has seen the ebbs and flows of the market, and I think that that's detrimental. You can't look over to make a quick buck in this industry and then not know that it's going to come full swing to where you're going to have to have those relationships. And I agree. I mean, I think a lot of people coming during the COVID times, everyone talks about that to where there was a lot of uncertainty, and then when the market started increasing in the e-com space, a lot of people grasped onto those high paying spot loads and kind of left a lot of the customers that gave them consistent business in the dust. And, it's for me, I wish that everyone would be on the same page in regards to being a carrier or a shipper, because those that, like you said, the metaphor of the goldfish that are, quick, slow minded of not paying attention to the long term, those ones that kind of get put in a bind in a down market.
And I remember I've had some instances, at least from full truckload, where you try to maintain your regular relationships, but if your customer mix wasn't good, then was this a situation where if you knew you were kind of a bad shipper, did you see any of them actually try a lot harder, or is this my biggest thing that I don't hear about is I wonder if the customers who had bad habits and were very bad at relationships, now that the market is soft, I wonder if they're going back to their old ways or if they kind of had to learn and adjust their habits over the past 2 years when they couldn't find trucks.
I think there's a happy medium between the two. I think there's customers that got burned significantly over the past couple of years, and what you're seeing from them now is they're looking at it like, I'm going to take advantage of the market. I'm going to go for the lowest cost dollar. I'm going to play the spot market because spot market rates are lower than contracted rates. But you also have the customers that got burned in the past that are saying, I don't want to go through that again. So the only way to not go through that again is to have good relationships, a trusting relationship with your service providers, to know that when the market does come full circle, that they're going to give you equal rates and give you good service. Because right now, any shipper can go to the market and get the same rate they're getting from a carrier that's been, long standing with them. But do they want to play that game knowing that the market might come full swing, back in the next year?
So, looking at relationships, before we move on to our next topic, green flags and red flags. If I'm a shipper and I'm looking at evaluating my current relationship, because it feels that way in freight, you call them up, you talk to them more than you talk to your spouses sometimes. I've had that happen.
Yeah.
I've had carriers where it's like, hey, I've talked to you a lot. What are some green flags in terms of what looks good in a relationship right now? And then what are some red flags where if I'm a carrier, maybe I'm doing this, I may need to change?
For us, it's transparency. I mean, that goes both ways from a shipper and from a carrier. I mean, we try to be fully transparent in regards to, how we run our model, what we do from a transportation standpoint to our customers, the pricing that we come up with. And, with that said, is like, we're not going to sit here and say, hey, we're going to be the cheapest price that comes in on RFPs. And I think that, to me, for a shipper to a carrier, that's a red flag. If you're having new carriers come in and they're percentage points lower than your incumbent carriers, that is a red flag to me, because there's a lot of carriers right now that are giving paper rates, thinking that when the market does turn around, well, I can at least go back to the customer and ask for a higher increase rate. And there's a lot of that going on because people just are trying to get the business. So I think from a shipper, you really have to know the market and be able to trust your current providers to give you market intel on where the rates are at and if you're getting paper rates.
I think that's really interesting because I saw that conversation with a 4PL one time. I was doing a brokerage and we were doing an RFP and we came in dirty cheap to try and secure it. But actually the 4PL came back, and even though we had the relationship with a carpet shipper, the 4PL was like, "Bro, I can't take you. I'm not going to send you anything because our matrix is skewered." Is that something a lot of folks don't consider? Is they just fire from the hip and they forget that, well, you're still not going to win it because maybe another party is going to gatekeep you?
Absolutely. You got to think 4PLs are the in between the BCO and the actual maybe transportation provider. And if those transportation providers are not sticking to their dedicated rates, that's a bad look on 4PLs. So a lot of people talk about the shipper, the end user, the BCO is like, oh, they got kind of hosed in the bad market. But a lot of these 4PLs that manage the transportation or manage the RFPs, they were just in the same boat as some of these BCOs, to where it shined a very bad light on them as well if the carriers that they picked out weren't able to adhere to the rates they submitted.
That's one of those things that keeps me up at night. I'm very glad I don't have to do pricing at the moment. But let's switch gears a minute about technology. FreightWaves talks about technology a lot. Freight Tech, I can tell you 5 different TMSs, 3 different trackers, 2 of them that uses different things. A lot of times whenever we're in this market, folks will not really invest, but they want to see the solutions. That's what someone that I said was, all this crap we invested for the past 2 years, it better start working. What's the state of technology right now, at least on your neck of the woods, in terms of now that the market's soft? Is this when you try to hit the gas, or do you have things in the pipeline you want to try to test out with less volumes?
From ITS, we're always in an evaluation mode. Whether it's build, buy, develop on your own. We're always looking at it from an ROI standpoint. Where are we going to get the return on our investment if we build this or if we buy this, and what's to be the quickest return? Even though it's a down market, you can't stop what has gotten you here. You got to know the transportation industry is going to come back. We're gassed down. We feel like right now is a great time to continue to invest and be innovators in the market space. There's so much opportunity out there to create better visibility to your customers. And create better efficiency internally, and we're never going to get away from the actual people here at ITS, but we are heavily invested in technology. That's just to come alongside them and create a better work-life balance for them, and also to create better visibility to the customers.
Biggest low-hanging fruit right now in tech that you guys are implementing, at least from my experience, one thing I've heard, and this is from like owner-operator communities, is more acceptance towards tracking and more understanding of an ELD tracking solution. When it used to be 4 years ago, they'd say, heck no, I'm going to wrap my thing in tinfoil because I don't want you to like steal my airwaves or something. What are some of the biggest tech wins that y'all are able to get so far?
I think from us, we got a pretty cool platform that we're rolling out. We're demoing. We have a few customers that are actually using it. So it's giving the visibility on the ocean, drayage, and coming into the ports and creating that visibility for a lot of the customers that we deal with. That we can all say it. The past couple of years, the demurrage and detention charges have just stifled some of these BCOs. So creating that visibility, but it's really end to end. It brings it into the ports. It shows it to where we pick it up. Whether we cross dock or put it in one of our dry vans and take it to the end user, it's really creating that visibility, but also exception-based management. Technology has gone so much further than the spreadsheets and the Google Docs, and customers are tired of having to get all these emails coming back and forth. So us really creating that visibility platform to where it gives exception-based management, that's been a big win for us, is just increasing all the overall experience that the customer has with ITS.
I remember working with some port ones back out of Port of Savannah. And one of the craziest things that I learned when we were converting them, because we'd be truckload. So we'd have Dre pick it up, send it to the cross dock, fit it in, send it full truckload. And the craziest part was they just didn't always know where it was in the stacks. So you'd be getting these PO numbers and like, oh, no, use this one. Oh, I had to switch this one around. And they're all similar refill shipments to Northern Georgia, but you never could figure out like in terms of visibility. And one more example was a guy who did soap, orders it from South Korea. The visibility is so bad right now that he keeps getting notifications that it's shipped and then that it's delayed because it's either, I'm assuming, not getting partialed into a container or maybe somewhere along the line. So is that something where, having such a heavy experience in that, is the biggest bottleneck right now the customers, or maybe like the steamship lines, or maybe the end-to-end, the first leg of the customer shipping it in? Like, what are some of the biggest challenges? Because you have the platform, but is there anyone holding it up for adoption?
I think that there's a lot of factors that come into that for holding it up. And I think that goes back to some of the visibility, like I was saying, is that, if you can get down to the SKU level, which that's super exciting. We're going to be able to produce that coming up here shortly, but getting down to the SKU level and being able to give that visibility of where things are at, then you can start narrowing down the bottlenecks in the actual transportation cycle. But it's a allotment of different things. With the lack of containers coming in, and then when they hit the port, if there's any congestion, and then get them over the cross dock and then get them into our dry vans, there's several things that can play a factor into why there are delays. The ports, obviously, every time there's a delay or a strike at one port, then it just pivots to another one. So that's always going to be a thing. We're never going to get away from that. So transportation, that's why I think we're all in it. There's always variables that you got to kind of overcome.
Well, I think that ties into the labor negotiations, almost ties into the relationship building, because I'm assuming some warehouses may use unionized labor, some may use non-unionized labor, but it wouldn't matter if they're still waiting on the dock, the longshoremen, and the workers to send it in the first chain. Have there been pretty good conversations? Are most folks aware of the kind of the situation, or is it more like a hurry up and wait? Because all we hear about right now is the whole UPS and Yellow situation with parcel and LTL.
Yeah. No, I think, we have a gentleman here at ITS. He's very knowledgeable, Paul Brazier. He does quite a bit of stuff in regards to what's going on at the ports. We're pretty vocal about, there's a lot of issues that are taking place. And, um, within regards to the YRC and the UPS, I agree with you. I think we hear about this quite a bit, especially on the UPS side, where there's going to be a possible strike. And it's kind of just everyone hurry up and wait, see what's going to happen. You got the strike up in Vancouver going on, and it's just another thing that goes on in the industry that we have to adjust and adapt to. And I think having the knowledge and understanding what's taking place and be able to give that proactively to your customers so they can pivot, that's what being a logistics provider is about.
I feel like before COVID, had something like this happen, customers would be just screaming from the rooftops, very angry, a lot of vitriol. Because I remember I started back in 14, so you get some really picky customers sometimes. And now with COVID, does it feel like at least they've kind of gotten, hey, it could always be worse situation?
I think everyone's kind of touched the stove and they know what it feels like. And I feel like everyone's kind of taking a step back saying, hey, things could be a lot worse. Let's work together. That is one thing I like, because I agree. Over the past years in logistics, it felt like everything was a little bit bifurcated. And now everyone's kind of coming together because everyone went through such turmoil, over during COVID. So I think that's kind of where, everyone's looking at it from a brighter light, saying, things could be a lot worse.
And y'all are multimodal. So I think this is really cool. When I was putting my notes here, let's pull it up here. Asset light, intermodal, expedited, dedicated. When we talk about dedicated, I am curious because dedicated usually means two different things. In truckload, I did dedicated where we take over a Target DC or something, or a Dollar General, and we'd manage the trans. But is your dedicated solution one where you're normally just putting carriers in dedicated lanes and finding capacity, or do you take over the whole warehouse ops and then source?
So we do both. What we call dedicated, we just had this conversation too, because I grew up learning dedicated is exactly that. Like, let's get a set group of drivers that run static business, and that's what they do. To us, dedicated is full service, all miles paid. You have the same drivers in there, and they run the same routes every single day, and they have maybe night deliveries. But our dedicated solution is exactly what you're talking about. We own a facility, or we'll own specific lanes, and we do maybe the cross dock, the hostling out of that whole entire DC. So it's an owned, full encompassing bid package, and that you have drivers running nonstop. And then we have the contracted piece, which is the static lanes. You have committed pricing, whether that's volume or waterfall.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about, because I remember the craziest ones we did. This was back at US Express. We do dedicated packages, but it was funny because the folks they had were in the pricing group, and they had their own little software that would tell you X amount of trucks with Y amount of lanes and everything. And then they would just send this out, and then everyone else had to pick it up. Looking at the inside of warehouses and other stuff, when you do these dedicated things, does it give you any specific insights into how some of these customers are performing? Is there any cool takeaways? Because I've seen some customers that are still barely figuring out EDI, and they don't even know their own internal processes. And I have some that are like fully on board with API end-to-end visibility. We need our partners to do it. Are things getting better, or are we still in the trenches on warehousing, at least in that DC outbound kind of scenario?
It's softening up a little bit. I think that with the overstocking of all the warehouses, that kind of got everyone on their heels. But I think right now, with at least what we're seeing, is it's staying pretty set on what the bid is and what amount of runs that we should be running. We're not getting a lot of canceled lanes or canceled deliveries. So that to me assures that actually people are starting to buy a little bit more, and that their actually projections are accurate. And I think that is a huge thing where, a couple of years ago, people were projecting out certain lines of business and then they would not fulfill those. And what happened was they started burning relationships with the drivers and with the providers. I mean, for us, when we open up a dedicated solution, we hire drivers, we have HR, we have safety, we have everything at the facility. And, that's a lot of overhead. That's a lot of cost that goes into it. And if you start canceling lanes or having changes to the overall dedicated solution, that really looks poorly on the warehouse that's supposed to be producing all the packages coming out.
I think that's a really great takeaway that you just highlighted, because I remember before COVID and before the tech, You get a down market, but it's a large carrier. Let's say I need to fill the bucket, 7,000 loads a week for like 2,500 trucks. The problem would be the customers would either accidentally or they just didn't have the visibility, and they would say, okay, I'll give you 100, but they keep only sending like 25. And then in Q4, they send like 125. And then they get mad at you, and it's like, we agreed to 100, my friend, you know?
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think that's why you got to stay agile as a transportation company. That comes back to the relationship. I mean, hey, what is your guys' projections look like for this quarter, and what does it look like for the back end of the year? Because you got to be able to stay flexible. I think that's a great thing about being at ITS is a lot of times when that does happen, we have the ability to stay flexible, putting our trailers in facilities. And if they flex up 25-30% above what they have historically done, we have that ability to flex with our trailers and maybe use partner power and or our own assets.
And trailer pools are a big one. I've noticed that's one thing over the past few years we're seeing a lot more use. Brokerages are investing in trailers now. We see I think Wabash and a few others have the trailer sharing programs. When you're looking at those solutions, you want to get to a customer, you want to offer them preloaded trailers. Is the strategy still at the moment you want to buy your own and control your own, or is there that opportunity to integrate tech and solutions to have some of these to cover any differences? Like if I need 20 more, maybe I'll go with a provider that gives me flex leasing trailers or something.
Yeah, we've done both lease trailers, purchase trailers. I think that is the nice part about having a lease program is that during peak, if you have an influx of trailers, you're able to do that. Technology is a huge play. Having an asset management system, the utilization of your trailers is hugely important. I think that's a lot of times where people say, "I got to go rent some more trailers," but meanwhile, you're only utilizing 70% of your current trailer base. So having that visibility, again, it goes back to the tech. But I think for us, like at ITS, we're invested in having our placard ITS trailers and having that representation, that marketing at our customer's facility.
Are y'all utilizing telematics as well if they're empty, loaded, cargo cameras? I was one of my biggest problems I ran into when I managed trailer pools is you'd have a pool of 250 at a Procter & Gamble. But the problem was that either they didn't know because they only checked their yard once a day, or they were purposely not telling you because they needed that extra warehouse space, and you're only paying $15 a day in demurrage.
No, that's funny. Yeah, no. So we're going through all of our trailers, any ones that do not have that, and we're putting the weight thing in there where it's going to actually show what's been unloaded, what's offloaded, and what's loaded. We have looked at the cameras as well. We had some pushback, a little bit interesting enough, at some of the locations where some people loading the trailers didn't like being on camera. But I hear you when it comes to that. No customers are going to sit here and want to go out there and search 150 trailers and tell you which ones are loaded or not, especially if they can get a little extra storage out of it for 15, $20 a day.
Well, I think that's fun too. The pushback from the customer, they'll say it's because we don't want our employees filmed, but I've seen customers purposefully, they know that they have a weak link and they load them wrong or there's excess shifts. I noticed this with beverage customers because they weren't shrink wrapped right. And so if you had the visibility in there, you could say, oh, it wasn't me, it was y'all. And then they have to go back and pay the charge instead of making the carrier, or you all have to deal with the OS&D.
Yeah, I've seen that too, especially with high volume customers. You can see where they, don't want to have that film because they're rushing to load the trailers. But I think from what we've done in regards to like with our SOPs is anytime we have any situation where there's a tilted pallet during transition, what we do is we'll have the drivers start taking pictures before they head out, and just always taking a picture, upload it into our system. That way we have full visibility of what's going on. That way we can go back and have the conversation with the customer. And if there's a situation where something does tilt during, transportation, then we can have the conversation with the driver as well.
I think that's the hardest part. When we talk about relationships, we talk about the higher level things, but some of the simple things like, hey, will you give my driver access to go back and take a picture before it's shipped? And the trust in that I'm not going to try to nail you to the wall if something happens. And then vice versa. As soon as something goes wrong, don't just assume the driver didn't do his due diligence with the load bars. Because some of them won't let your drivers go back there, but their rate con says you should have. And then you're just like, I feel like that's the real challenging conversation, is changing habits.
Yeah, and also too, what's the end goal? Like, what's your end goal with your customer? If they're going to say we don't want you having your drivers go back for any other reason outside, hey, it's not safe for them to go back. The only reason why we do it is so we can safely take the product from one point to the other and get it delivered in one piece. And isn't that the whole objective of what we do in this transportation? So if we're implementing things to help our customer out, there should be no reason why there should be any pushback. But again, that goes back to having that well-established trust and relationship with your customer.
Especially in the market conditions now, as all that matters. Folks, Manny, if folks want to learn more about ITS, get in contact or check out more of your information, what's the best way to reach out?
Definitely go on my LinkedIn. I think that's the best way to go about it. I'm always available. My email or phone number, give me a call anytime. I think that the more we can share, industry knowledge and it strengthens all of us around, the better off we're going to be.
Knowledge is power. Sir, thank you so much. Pleasure getting to interview you as well. Going to keep checking out the tech and keep an eye on what you're working on.
Yep, more to come. Thank you so much.
That's going to be a wrap for this show, but you can check us out at freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling for the newsletter. And if you missed this, it'll be on YouTube, freightwaves.com. I think it's YouTube/C/freightwaves. We'll also be on Apple and Spotify if you like podcasts. Join us, though, for the newsletter on Thursdays at 1 p.m. And we'll be back live next Tuesday, 1 p.m. as well. That's a wrap for today. See you next week. We'll do it live.